Hi everyone, I'm Holly. Today I'm going to talk to you about one of my winter books. This is Star. It's about a Siberian tiger, and this is actually the ninth in my series of winter books. And I wanted to explain why I decided to write a book about a Siberian tiger, and a little bit about the stories behind the story. This one is actually based on two real-life tigers, so I want to tell you about them. So, why did I decide to write wintry books in the first place? Well, I have always really loved snow. So this is a photograph of me, my brother James, and our dog Alice. Now I think I was about 10 when this photograph was taken, and this is the snowiest winter that I can remember. It was so exciting. The snow by the end of the winter was actually so deep that our dog Alice gave up going out for walks because the snow was up to her stomach, and she just didn't like it. She decided it was too damp, too cold, too wet, and she decided that she just gave up on walks for the rest of the winter. We actually couldn't go to school for quite a lot of the time, and I imagine, actually looking back on it, my parents were starting probably to get a bit worried about whether they were going to be able to find food in the shops and that kind of thing. So it was a really exciting winter for me, and for James as children. So I kind of always looked back on that winter as a really lovely, exciting, kind of special time. We made, as you can see in the back here behind us, we made lots of different snowmen. This is actually a snow cat. We tried to make an igloo. It didn't work very well. But we had a lot of fun, so it's got really good memories for me. So I really enjoy writing books about snow and about snowy adventures, and I also have always loved finding out about lots of different kinds of wild animals. And I always thought I knew a reasonable amount about tigers, but it was only a couple of years ago that I discovered that tigers don't just live in hot places. I had always thought of tigers as jungle animals, living only in warm climates. But actually, Siberian tigers live in the snow, which was really exciting. And it was just something that really surprised me when I found out about it. So the way I first found out about Siberian tigers was through watching a news program. I saw a news article about a tiger called Vladek. Vladek's actually named after a Russian city called Vladivostok, which is in the far east of Russia, almost as far east as Japan. So Vladek is a wild Siberian tiger who decided that he wanted to go exploring around the city of Vladivostok. So one of the problems that people and animals have got at the moment is that as our population as humans increases, we're starting to spread out more into areas where animals want to be, where they have always expected that they can be. And that's happening to a certain extent in Siberia as well, that the space for the animals is being reduced as the people start taking up much more space. So Vladek got a bit confused and ended up roaming round the city of Vladivostok. Can you imagine that you go out to do your shopping and you find yourself face to face with a tiger? At one point, Vladek apparently did walk quite close to a supermarket, and I just thought that was the funniest idea, that you ended up with a tiger wandering past the supermarket. So this is a photograph of Vladek. It's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but this is quite a busy main road just outside Vladivostok, and that is Vladek crossing the road in front of all those cars. So imagine you're just driving to work, and then you see there's a tiger crossing the road in front of you. I love this photograph. It's just so funny. So what happened was that obviously Vladek couldn't keep on roaming around Vladivostok because people were terrified. So a group of wildlife specialists came in, and they captured Vladek by using sedative darts so that he could be put to sleep temporarily and then taken away somewhere safe. And this picture, this is Vladek when he's just flown. You can see he's been carried in a big crate, and he's been flown by helicopter to a wildlife reserve, a really safe area where he can live, instead of going and roaming around Vladivostok trying to go to the supermarket. You can just see him looking out of the crate there. I'm pretty sure they must have used some kind of remote control to open up the door of the crate, because you really would not want to be the person who was letting the tiger out of the box when the tiger was really not very happy about it. You can see that the pilots and the scientists are there standing on top of the helicopter to make sure they're well out of the way. So you would think that now everything was fine. Vladek has been gone. He's back in the wildlife reserve where he's really safe. Unfortunately, not quite so much, because it turns out Vladek really likes Vladivostok, and he went back. And he'd been taken about 400 miles away to get to this wildlife reserve, but he went all the way back again. He crossed roads, he crossed the Trans-Siberian Railway, and luckily this time he then did a bit of a detour and he went round the city rather than going through. But the scientists and the wildlife specialists had put a tracking collar on him, so now at least they can tell when he's getting a bit too close. But I thought this was just really funny, seeing this news article and then reading more about it, that he obviously has decided that Vladivostok is somewhere he really, really likes. So that really stuck in my mind, and when I was able to then put it together with a story about another tiger later on, I decided it was going to make a perfect book plot. But what I'm going to do is read you the first chapter of Star now, because you'll see that my main character, Anna, is about to have exactly the same experience that I did. She is about to see a news program about Vladivostok and about Vladek the tiger wandering through the centre of the city. So I hope you can all see the cover and how beautiful it is. This cover is by Britta Teckentrup. I love this cover. I love the way that Star is looking back. And I just think it's really, really beautiful, and I love all the trees silhouetted against the dark sky as well. So I'm also just going to show you the dedication for this book. So this says, for all my readers in Russia, thank you for the wonderful welcome you gave me when I visited, because I've actually been really lucky over the last few years to go to Russia several times because my books are translated into Russian. And actually, back in December, I got to go to Siberia to be part of the launch of the Russian version of this book, which was really, really exciting. And I've never been somewhere with so much snow, ice, and where people are so much less worried about the fact that it's snowy and icy, because obviously they're used to it. I was thinking, wow, this is really exciting, and being really impressed by people, driving very, very professionally in snowy conditions. And at the time, it was only -10 degrees, and they said that's nothing. By the time it gets to January or February, it could well be -30. So I thought, okay, I'm quite glad that I went in December rather than January or February. So this is Star, chapter 1, and here are Anna and one of her friends from school in one of the illustrations. "Do you really think it will snow?" Anna whispered as soon as Mr. Ford's back was turned. They were supposed to be reading, but most of the class had at least one eye on the window and the patch of yellowish-grey sky they could see over the wall of the playground. "Definitely," Ruby hissed back. "It's so cold, and it just looks like snow, doesn't it?" Anna nodded. There was something about that scrap of sky. It looked heavy, as if the clouds were filled with snow. Just in time for the end of term tomorrow. It would be perfect. She peered over her page at the clock. Surely it was home time by now. Usually she loved ending the day with reading, but the thought of snow made it too hard to concentrate. When the bell rang at last, there was a second of complete silence, and then everyone leapt up, cramming books and pencil cases into their trays and racing for the cloakroom. "If it snows like it's supposed to, maybe we won't even have to come to school tomorrow," Ruby said hopefully. "The last day's always fun, though," Anna said, wrapping a scarf round her neck. "Mr. Ford said we can watch a DVD after lunch." "But that's not as much fun as playing in the snow," she admitted. "Exactly! Come on, let's go and see if it's started yet." Anna and Ruby hurried out into the playground to look at the sky. It was a dark, dark grey now, but there were still no snowflakes. "Do you think the forecast's got it wrong?" Ruby said, peering at the clouds. Anna sighed. I hope not. It'll snow, Zvezda, don't worry. Baba! Anna turned to hug her grandma. I forgot you were picking me up today. Mum's going to her office Christmas party and Dad's working, she explained to Ruby. I'm staying over at Baba's house tonight. Ruby nodded. What does whatever your Baba said mean? She whispered. It's Russian for my star, Anna explained. It's just a nice thing to call somebody. Baba, do you really think it's going to snow? Definitely. Those are snow clouds. If it doesn't start before you go to bed tonight, you will wake up to a white world tomorrow, I'm certain. Now, she looked thoughtfully at Anna's bag. Do you have everything? Your mama dropped a bag off with me this morning, but she said to make sure you'd brought everything home. Homework, PE kit. No homework, and I've got my PE kit here. Anna waved it in front of her. See you tomorrow, Anna. My mum's calling me. Ruby dashed away, and Anna slipped her hand into Baba's. Can we watch a film together tonight? I should think so. You can find me a nice Christmas film. I made those honey cookies you like. We can have some when we get home. They walked back to Baba's house, admiring all the Christmas lights and decorations on the way. Anna liked the sparkling reindeer standing on her neighbour's lawn. We're going to put up our tree this weekend. Have you got a tree yet, Baba? My little tinsel tree's in the loft, but I haven't got it down yet. Perhaps you can help me put it up later. But it feels early to me to be putting up a tree. Christmas is weeks away, Baba grumbled, and Anna laughed. The church in Russia worked on a different calendar, so Christmas Day wasn't until January the 7th. There would be all the New Year celebrations first. Anna loved the party that Baba always had for all her Russian friends on New Year's Eve. You could always have Christmas twice, Anna suggested. 2 Christmases? Certainly not. Baba shook her head, pretending to be cross. What an idea! You know your cousins in Russia won't be on their school holiday until the day before New Year's Eve. Anna sighed. I bet Tatiana and Peter and Anushka have got masses of snow. Oh, yes. Baba smiled. But nothing like a year or so ago when they had that huge snowfall. Do you remember? 2 months' worth of snow fell in one night, and Uncle Michael had to dig out their front door. I wish we could go and visit them again, Anna said enviously. But in the winter this time, we could go to Russia for New Year. I'd love to see really deep snow. Here it's just cold. She shivered. It was definitely a lot colder than it had been the day before. They hurried into Baba's little flat, and Baba made a cup of tea for herself and hot chocolate for Anna. Dipping the spiced honey cookies into the hot chocolate, Anna started to feel her frozen toes again. This is nice, Baba, she murmured, but she couldn't resist looking round to check out of the window for snow. It'll come, Anna, I promise. Let's go and watch our film, eh? It was lovely, snuggled up on the sofa. Anna almost forgot about the snow. She was starting to feel really Christmassy now. What should she get Baba for Christmas, she wondered, as the film ended and Baba went into the kitchen to heat up the soup she'd made for dinner. Baba loved little ornaments. She had lots of them on the shelves in her living room, animals and dancing girls and baskets of flowers. Perhaps she could buy her grandma a special new one. Anna, switch it over to the news, please, Baba called from the kitchen. I like to know what's going on. I can hear it from here. Anna changed channels and went on looking at Baba's ornaments, wondering whether she had enough pocket money to buy something really nice. Then something the newsreader said caught her attention, and she yelped with excitement. What is it? Baba asked, popping her head round the door. Look! It's Vladivostok! That's near where Tatiana and Peter and Anushka live, isn't it? It's on the news. I'll turn the soup down. Baba hurried back into the kitchen and then came to sit with Anna. What's happening? Is it the snow again? No! They're saying there's a tiger in the city. Oh my! I don't believe it. Baba peered at the screen, gasping at the blurry footage of a tiger, a real tiger, racing across a busy road. They're trying to catch him, Anna explained, and they've given him a name, Vladek, like the city. Did you ever see a tiger when you lived near Vladivostok, Baba? Never, her Baba murmured. Tigers are so wild. They never usually come near people. Even in our tiny village close to the forest, we never saw one. Right into the city? It's hard to believe." "I hope the tiger's okay," Anna murmured. "I bet he was scared of those cars." Baba nodded, and then sighed as the news program showed footage of police tracking the tiger. "And now he has all those people chasing him." "They won't hurt him, will they?" Anna asked worriedly. "He's so beautiful. But I suppose it would be really scary if he got into a supermarket or something." "Oh!" Baba took her phone out of her pocket. "It's your mama. She probably wants to say good night to you before she goes to this party. Hello, Maria." "Can I tell her about the tiger, Baba, please?" Anna asked excitedly. "Maria, you'll not believe what we just saw on the news. Here, Anna will tell you." Baba passed over the phone, and Anna grabbed it eagerly. "Mum, there's a tiger loose in Vladivostok, a wild tiger." "Wow! What's it doing there?" "No one knows. They said on the news that maybe it was looking for food. They're trying to catch him to take him back to the forest." "Tigers are really rare," her mum said. "But I suppose with towns getting bigger, they will end up coming closer to people. I expect they're doing everything they can to catch him safely, Anna. Don't worry. Are you having fun with Baba? Did she make honey cookies for you?" "Yes, and we watched a film." "Lucky you. Sleep well, okay? Last day of school tomorrow." "Have fun at the party, Mum." Anna handed back the phone and heard Baba and Mum switch to Russian. Anna knew some Russian, but not enough to understand Baba when she was talking fast. She went back to looking at Baba's ornaments. Most of them were animals, she realized. Anna had played with some of them before. There was a whole family of gorgeous bears, the littlest one not much bigger than the end of Anna's thumb. She loved arranging them, and she'd given them all names long ago. But behind the bears, looking a bit dusty, was another creature, long and low, with a beautiful heavy curl of tail. Anna picked up the wooden figure, wondering how she'd never noticed it before. It was a tiger, but it looked plumper than the one on the news, small and a bit fluffy as though it was a cub. The woodcarver had used some sort of special wood with a clear grain to it, so even though the tiger wasn't painted, it still had beautiful stripes. "Ah, you found my little tiger." Baba came over to see what Anna was holding. "He's lovely, isn't he?" "Where did he come from, Baba?" Baba smiled. "Your Uncle Michael made him for me. He's very good at carving animals. He made the little bears, too. Your cousin Anushka has a tiger just like this one, and when I said how beautiful it was, Michael made one for me." Anna smiled. She'd only met Anushka once, but they spoke on the phone sometimes. They were almost exactly the same age, and they had the same name. Anushka was a pet name for Anna. She wondered what Anushka was doing right now. Had she seen the news about the tiger in Vladivostok too? Anna put the tiger in the middle of the kitchen table while they were eating their soup, and when it was time for bed she looked pleadingly at Baba. "Could I take him with me? He reminds me of Vladek, the tiger on the news. I can't stop thinking about him." "Of course you can." Baba hugged her. "And don't worry, Anna. I'm sure the tiger will be all right." Anna had just put on her pajamas when Baba called from the living room. "Anna! Look out of the windows, Rezhdamoya." Anna hurried across the room and drew back the curtains. "It's snowing," she whispered delightedly. A few fat, heavy flakes were floating down, glowing in the light of the street lamp. "Do you think there'll be more?" she said as Baba came to stand behind her. "Will it stick?" "I'm sure it will. Go to bed. You'll catch cold standing there staring at it." "Will you come and talk to me for a bit?" Anna pleaded. "You could tell me about my cousins and their village." She loved it when Baba told her stories about life in Russia. "It's getting late," Baba grumbled, but she came and sat on the end of Anna's bed anyway. "Do you want to hear about the snow again, Zvezdamoya?" "Yes, please," Anna said sleepily. "Okay, well, did you know Anushka once went outside in the snow without her warm hood on, and it was so cold that her eyelashes froze?" "That's silly, Baba. You're making it up." "Not at all. You have to be careful when it's that cold. And now with tigers out there too. I shall call your auntie, tell her to make sure they all stay close to the house. Are you asleep, Anna?" "Good night then, Anushka." Baba leaned over to give her a kiss, and then padded away, her footsteps tiger soft. Anna smiled to herself. She loved it when Baba called her that. Yawning, she rolled over and looked at the wooden tiger standing guard on the little chest of drawers beside the bed. He was carved with a snarl, and he looked fierce, but Anna thought perhaps he was scared. She snuggled under the duvet, wishing she'd brought her really warm pyjamas. Sleepily, she reached out to hold the little wooden tiger, tucking him next to her cheek. Not really fierce, she thought, as her eyes drifted shut again, and the tiger cub slunk away down the street outside Baba's flat, shaking the snowflakes from his whiskers. So, that's the first chapter of Star, and that chapter is all about Anna here in Britain. But you're going to see what happens in a little bit in the next chapter when Anna makes a magical journey and sort of becomes one with her cousin Anushka in Russia. But what I want to do is explain to you where the other part of the story came from and how I managed to put the two tiger stories together to put them into a book. So I'd already made notes for myself about the story of Vladek. I knew I wanted one day to put it into a book. It was really exciting, but it just wasn't quite enough to make the whole story just about this one tiger wandering around Vladivostok. But then I came across another amazing tiger story set in Russia. And this is the story of a tiger cub called Zolushka. Now, Zolushka is the Russian name for Cinderella. And this is Zolushka. So this is actually quite a sad looking photograph. What happened with Zolushka was that, well, people think that her mother must have been killed by poachers, because although Siberian tigers are really, really rare and very protected, it's absolutely forbidden to hunt them, unfortunately people do still do that sometimes. So people think that what probably happened is Zolushka's mother was killed and she was left behind on her own. Now, she was too small to look after herself properly. She couldn't hunt for herself, so she just went on getting hungrier and hungrier. And also, because she was hungry, she wasn't able to keep herself warm enough. So when she was actually found by a group of hunters who were out hunting not tigers but hunting deer, she was really, really ill. And they picked her up, they wrapped her up in coats, and they took her to a vet. I wonder what it must have felt like to be the vet, to suddenly have a group of men turning up on your doorstep with a tiger wrapped up in coats, expecting you to do something about it. So they took her to the vet, and she actually had to have an operation to have the end of her tail amputated because she had frostbite. Frostbite is when you get really, really cold, and all the blood and the warmth in your body goes to the middle of you, to the really important bits like your heart and your brain, to keep you alive, and it goes away from the kind of outer bits. Like on a human it would be the tip of your nose, the tips of your ears, the ends of your fingers and the ends of your toes. On a tiger it also includes the tip of your tail. So the tip of Zolushka's tail had to be amputated, but although that's really, really sad, it does have a happy ending, because this is another photo of Zolushka. Look how beautiful she is now. She's a lovely, fully grown tiger, because what happened was, after she'd had the end of her tail amputated, she was taken to a wildlife reserve, and they looked after her very, very carefully to try and make sure that although she was in a wildlife park, she wasn't losing her wild tiger-ness. So she was still completely wild. Although they were feeding her and she was still a cub, she didn't ever become a tame or domesticated tiger. And once she was fully recovered and was old enough to hunt for herself, they actually managed to release her back into the larger part of the reserve, where she could be living by herself completely. And she adjusted amazingly well to being released properly back into the wild. In fact, she is a huge wildlife success story, because not that much longer after they released her, they kept tracks on her again with a tracker collar, and with camera traps as well. So this is a photograph taken by a camera trap. She's looking into the camera that she's just walked past. And not that long after she was released, they took another photograph of her. This is Zolushka again with one of her cubs. And Zolushka was the very first tiger to have been re-released back into the wild, who then went on to have babies. Now, Siberian tigers, or Amur tigers is the other name for them, they are really, really rare. There's only about 400 of them in the wild. So when I tell you that Zolushka's had 4 cubs since she's gone back into the wild, you can understand that that is actually really amazing. She has added so many tigers to that wild population, which is just fantastic. She is an amazing wildlife success story. So the next part of the story of Star, you'll see how it's inspired by the story of Zolushka. It's about Anna and her cousin Anushka, who've sort of become one person in a way, because this is Anna's dream. They are about to go and find a tiger, and I loved writing this part of the story. How exciting it would be to come across a tiger cub in the forest in Russia. So here we are. Look, this is the opening page of chapter 2. This is Anna's cousin Anushka looking out at the snow from her house in Russia. It was even colder when Anna woke up, and she huddled the bed covers over her head to make a warm little cave with her breath. Maybe Baba's heating hadn't come on, she thought. It had never been this cold when she'd slept over at Baba's before. Or perhaps the snow had gone on falling and falling the night before. Maybe they were snowed in, like Tatiana and Peter and Anushka had been in their village. Anna threw back the covers and bounced out of bed to look, but her room was so dark she could hardly see. It must be earlier than she'd thought. She picked her way across to the window and drew back the curtains. The snow was everywhere, piled up against the walls and glimmering in the purplish light of early morning. And it wasn't just the snow and the eerie light that was making everything look different, Anna realized, her fingers closing tightly on the curtain. The view from the window had changed. There was no road outside, no line of houses facing her window. Instead, there were trees, tall, dark pine trees laced with snow. A movement behind Anna made her whirl round, and she saw that the door of her bedroom was already opening. "Oh, you're up, Anushka!" Anna stared at the woman in the doorway. Everything in her head seemed suddenly clouded and confused. She was Anna, getting ready for the last day of school, excited that snow had started falling at last. But she was also Anushka, who didn't think snow was all that special. It just meant that the house was much colder, and she couldn't play outside for as long as she could in the summer. Anushka had been waking up to darkness and snow for weeks and weeks. Anna blinked, and her mamma gave her a hug, and then turned to go over to the other bed, the one that Anna hadn't even noticed. "Tatiana, are you awake? I'm making sirniki, girls. Hurry up and get dressed while I go and wake up Peter. You need something nice and hot on such a cold day." Sirniki were Anushka's favourite, little pancakes with creamy cheese in the mixture. She started getting dressed at once. She wasn't sure what she'd been dreaming about last night, but it had left her feeling odd, as though she had to think about everything twice before she did it. Anushka slid into her seat at the kitchen table, sniffing happily at the smell of frying pancakes. Her mamma passed her a plate with little round pancakes on it, and Anushka added jam and a spoonful of sour cream. Tatiana wandered in yawning, with Peter after her. They both brightened up when they saw the sirniki. Mamma passed out more plates and sat down at the table with them. "Listen to me, you three. You must be careful when you're outside today." "Why? Because it's so cold?" Anushka asked through a mouthful of pancake. She looked worriedly at the plate in the middle of the table. There weren't many pancakes left, and Peter was taking loads. Mamma shook her head. "It is cold today, but that's not the reason. Eva's father saw a tiger last night." Anushka let her fork fall onto her plate in surprise. Eva was her friend who lived a few houses away on the edge of the forest. Peter looked disbelieving. A tiger? What, while he was out hunting in the forest? But no one sees tigers, or hardly ever anyway. I know, and he wasn't even in the forest. He was taking firewood from the shed into the house. The tiger walked past the back of the shed, or so he says. Anushka wasn't sure whether her mamma believed Eva's father or not. She sounded a bit doubtful, and Anushka was too. Tigers were so rare, and they were really shy of people. A few of the hunters in the village said they'd seen tigers in the forest, or thought they had, but it was very unusual. They saw bears far more often, and wild boars sometimes too. Anyway, just in case, make sure you stay with the others today, won't you? Don't go off anywhere on your own. Anushka nodded, and as her mamma cleared away the plates and glasses, she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and drew out a wooden tiger, turning it over in her hands. It was just a little toy that her papa had carved for her. He liked to whittle a piece of wood to keep his hands busy in the evenings after they'd eaten dinner, and he'd made her so many beautiful wooden animals. Anushka had a whole line of them on the shelf in her bedroom, but this tiger was her favourite. Papa had carved it for her after they'd read a book of old folk tales, and Anushka had wanted the story about the girl who turned into a tiger over and over again. She loved the way that the grain of the wood shone like the tiger's stripy coat. Papa carved all sorts of things, but the animals and birds he made were the best. He spent ages watching wild creatures, and it showed in the carvings he made. For a moment, Anushka saw her wooden tiger on a different shelf, next to a china basket of flowers she'd certainly never owned. Then she shook her head, flicking away the daydream. She tucked her tiger back into her pocket. She could hear footsteps outside. That would be Eva coming to call for them ready to walk to school. "Did you hear about the tiger?" Eva shouted, as Anushka clumped out of the door in her boots. "Papa saw one. It nearly ate him." "I thought it just walked behind the woodshed," Anushka said doubtfully. "It was enormous," Eva said, ignoring her. "He's just lucky it didn't attack. It was so close." "What if it comes back?" Tatiana said. "We shouldn't stay outside too long, not if there's a tiger hanging about. It has to be here for food, doesn't it? We better hurry up and get to school." "Are there tracks, Eva?" Anushka asked curiously. "Can you see the tiger's paw prints by your woodshed?" "I don't think so. It snowed again last night. But we could nip back and have a look, just in case," Eva suggested hopefully. "Mamma said we have to stick together," Peter said firmly, "and keep well away from the forest. The tiger could be really close." "But we would be away from the forest," Eva said. "Our woodshed isn't near the forest, not that near anyway, and we'd be together. A tiger isn't going to attack us if we're all in a gang, is it? Aren't you curious?" "No." Peter shook his head grimly. "Tigers are massive. My grandfather has a tiger's tooth. He showed it to me and Tatiana." "What about me?" Anushka asked. She didn't remember seeing a tooth. "You were too little," Peter said crushingly. "I don't want to be anywhere near an actual tiger. It's looking for easy prey, Eva. Stupid prey, like you, going hunting for tiger prints when you've been told not to." Eva started to argue, but Tatiana was nodding determinedly, and she wasn't brave enough to go off on her own. So Eva grabbed a mittenful of snow and tried to sling it at Peter, but she missed, and then she started to laugh, giggling at herself and hurling snowballs at all three of them. Anushka sighed a little, even as she joined in the snowball fight. She knew Peter was right, really. It wasn't that she meant to ignore their mamma and risk being hurt by a tiger, but they were such rare and beautiful creatures, even if they were dangerous. She couldn't help feeling that it would be magical to see a tiger slipping in between the trees. Everyone at school had heard about the tiger, and Eva was mobbed as soon as they walked in. Even their teachers wanted to know more, and Eva and Anushka's class spent half an English lesson trying to talk about tigers and how fierce they were. All the chasing games at lunch were suddenly called Tiger in the Forest or The Tiger's Coming, and people kept popping round corners and roaring at each other. By home time, everyone was excited and giggly and enjoying being a bit scared. Anushka and the others usually walked home in a big group, chatting and messing about, but today everyone was tramping along fast. It was just too cold to be outside for long, and the snow was very deep. Even though paths had been dug through the drifts so people could walk through the village, it was still slippery and hard to see. Besides, even in their coats and boots and mittens, the cold cut straight through. Anushka walked back to her house with her brother and sister, and Eva and a couple of others, sticking together like they'd been told. None of them really expected to see a tiger, though. They'd spent the day laughing about the story, and lots of the older children had said Eva's father must have been mistaken. It was a deer he saw, or maybe a bear. Tigers were in the old folk tales they'd learned in school. The Udige people used to think that tigers were the spirit of the forest. That didn't fit into a world of phones and TV and computers. So, when Eva picked up a handful of snow and started creeping up behind Peter with a wicked look on her face, no one told her to stop. They shot away in all directions, ducking behind each other and scooping up more snow. Anushka hurled a snowball and caught Tatiana right on the side of her hood, and her big sister grabbed a handful of snow and whooped, "I'm going to get you!" Anushka didn't even think before she dashed off ahead. "You're too slow," she yelled back, turning to pull faces at Tatiana and the others. "Come on then, try and catch me." The snow was tightly packed under Anushka's boots as she charged along. She could hear Tatiana and the others chasing her, but they were falling behind. Anushka shot out of the pathway through a deep drift, not far from Eva's house, closer to the woods. She stood with her hands on her knees, panting and laughing to herself. The others were way behind, and she was all on her own for a moment. It was as she straightened up that she caught a glimpse of something moving in the trees behind her. A glint of rusty orange fur shining out against the snow and the dark branches. Anushka's heart stood still. It felt like it really had stopped. She certainly wasn't breathing. She froze like a statue, too terrified to move, let alone run away. While she was standing there, her mind raced. Was it better to be still? If she ran, wouldn't that just make the tiger chase after her? Perhaps it wasn't a tiger after all. It could be anything. A plastic bag flapping in the wind, or... No, it was definitely a tiger. As Anushka stood and stared, the creature stepped forward, gazing back at her. But this was no great, terrifying beast, its teeth bared, about to leap on her and drag her away. It was a cub, half-grown at most. That didn't mean it wasn't dangerous, of course. Anushka knew it still had claws like knives and razor-sharp teeth. The tiger growled, low in its throat, and Anushka shivered with fright. But the cub didn't come any closer, or show its teeth. It stood pressed against a tree, gazing at her. It looked worried, or even frightened, Anushka thought, her racing heartbeat slowing. The dazed, cold feeling inside her eased a little, and she started to be able to think again. The cub wasn't just small. She was almost sure it was too thin. It didn't look like the well-fed tiger she'd seen at the zoo in Vladivostok. It was skinny, and its coat was dirty and dull. It looked like it needed a mother tiger to give it a good wash. She giggled, mostly out of fright. The cub cringed back behind the tree, and Anushka gasped. It was scared of her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to frighten you. Truly I didn't." She looked into the cub's golden eyes for the first time, and saw that they were wide and worried in their edging of white fur. They gazed at each other, silent and still, and then Anushka stepped a little nearer. "What is it? What's wrong? You shouldn't be here, you know. You're too close to the village. It's dangerous." She saw the cub's ears flicker, and it glanced sideways, and then she heard the voices of the others, high and anxious. They were calling for her. "Anushka! Anushka, where are you? Anushka, answer us! Anushka, are you okay?" She looked round to see if they were close, and when she looked back, the cub was gone. She couldn't even see the tip of its tail. Her tail, Anushka thought. In that moment, when they'd looked into each other's eyes, she'd felt sure the cub was a girl, frightened and alone, just as she was. Anushka wished they'd had longer together. The only sign that a tiger had been there was a faint trail of paw prints leading away between the trees. Without even thinking about it, she scuffed over the nearest prints with her boot. "Anushka, where did you go? Why did you run off like that?" Eva came dashing out of the snowdrift path, her face red from running and cold. "We were worried about you." "You shouldn't have gone off on your own," Peter told her angrily. But she could tell he was only angry because he was frightened. "We're not supposed to go into the forest, and especially not today." "Sorry," she murmured. But what?" Peter snapped. "Nothing. Don't fuss. I didn't go into the forest, did I? Look, I can't touch a single tree from here." She'd been about to tell them she'd seen the tiger, and it was just a cub, not a huge, great man-eating terror. But she didn't. The words just wouldn't come. If she told the others that a tiger had wandered so close to the village again, everyone would panic. Lots of the men in the village went hunting for deer, and almost every household had a gun. It would take only one hunter to decide he needed to protect his family from the tiger. No, she had to keep quiet to keep the tiger safe. But most of all, Anushka wanted to keep that moment where she and the cub had looked into each other's eyes. So that's the end of chapter 2 of Star. And Anushka and the tiger are going to meet each other again, but maybe we'll find out about that another time. So I was wondering whether you would like to do your own writing about a tiger. So I have made some resources for you. So this is, at the moment you can see it doesn't actually look very much like a tiger. This is a picture of Star, but she's got no stripes. So what I thought that you might like to do is to add Star's stripes in by writing a tiger poem. This is a special kind of poem called a shape poem, where you fit the words into a particular shape. And this sheet is on my website, so you can go and download it and print it out. Or if you don't have a printer, don't worry, you can just draw your own tiger shape and try to fit the words of your poem into it. So once it has got words in it, it does start to look a bit more like a tiger. I shall show you. So this is my version, look, with some tigery stripes written on. It says, "I saw a tiger, a lonely tiger, padding through the glinting snow," and then it goes on. But I have to tell you, I am not very good at poems. I love writing, but I am a terrible poet, so I expect your poems will actually be a lot better. And the other thing that's also on my website is a sheet to help you make your own little tiger paper toy. So I have to say, I really enjoyed doing this. This is my version of Star, made from Britta's beautiful cover. Now mine is held together with what are called split pins, which are these things that you poke through and then you can open them out of the back. But don't worry if you haven't got those. You can easily just pop a little bit of string through and tie a knot on each side to hold your tiger's legs and tail together. And it's quite fun to be able to move the legs around and move the tail. So this sheet as well is also on the website so that you can download it and print it off. This one is a little bit more complicated if you haven't got a printer, but I expect you could, if you were clever, make your own tiger, but it would just not look exactly the same as this one, but that's fine. Or you could make any other kind of animal as well, really, if you wanted to. So I really hope that you have a chance to go and look at the website and maybe write a poem, make a tiger, and think more about those tigers in the snow. I've really enjoyed telling you about Star. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Bye!